Hey, my name's Cassie, and I sent you my application, including a Google slideshow, and I wanted to walk you through it a little bit and also just let you meet me, I guess. Um, I am so excited about the residency, and I think it felt important to just introduce myself because I think that my application is strange, and I wanted it to be clear that I'm a process person, and so um, the processes that I engage with, I work with very deeply and over a long time. And this simulation and the residency feels very connected to very much work that I've been doing for a long time, and it feels like the culmination of a lot of things that I've been thinking about and hoping to work with. So it's a very meaningful application for me, and I feel like you will receive maybe some very slick or design-based projects, and I wanted to ensure you that I'm a person that goes for depth and that I have kind of a long view and commitment to working on projects that relate to space and that integrate thinking about health and the economy. I'm going to walk you through some of my slides. This first one is of my first, like when I had a classroom in a New York public school. And we worked on a project about space, and it was really important because the school is very securitized. It was in a lot of trouble financially. There were metal detectors at the door. Police were walking through, even though it was very young children there. And one day I brought a rock that I'd found on the street, put it in the oven and made it hot, and I brought it into the class, and everybody touched it, and I told them that it was a meteor. And there was something about that moment that kind of changed everything in the classroom, where we realized that the world and the universe was much bigger than the confines of this room or the school or of New York City. And it began to become really important to the students and also to me, just to kind of relate some of the stuff that seemed hard in our world that was close to us and how that related to a much larger universe. I've been going to or watching different kinds of space industries for a long time, and it feels really rich to look at what was happening in the not even the early 2000s, around 2010 in the Bay Area, in Palo Alto, in Washington State, where there were a lot of startups that were looking to financialize space. And I began to kind of attend and watch and think about the ways that we may reproduce some of the systems that we use on Earth in space. And I'm, of course, very interested in how not to do that, but there were lots of really interesting learnings from going to lots of these sorts of launches of new space, financialized space projects. I got this amazing residency at George Mason University I believe it was in 2012, where I got to work with Professor Geller to think about sound waves in space and also think about the relationship between celestial bodies in space and if in some way debt could have come from space. And so here you see him examining some objects that I had made when I had fused together lots of receipts for school and for living expenses while I was getting my very expensive education. And we were looking at the differences and similarities between asteroids and debt at this particular moment. And we eventually made a very small temporary installation at Smithsonian Museum of Space, which led me to think more about space. And I started this kind of hyperbolic project called the Debt to Space program, which was really about kind of getting people to become almost I almost hypnotize them, put them in a state together where they would imagine that debt was kind of inhabiting their body, like the sort of personal, financialized, unpayable debts that many of us in the US walk around with, and also in the UK now. And we would imagine kind of evacuating that stuff from our body and screaming it out and imagine it going to space. And then I worked with radio stations around the world to get that sound played on radio waves so that it would go to space and be burned by the sun. In this portfolio that I sent you, there's a link to a recording for the Debt to Space program. It's a 1-minute recording, which is, I think, very funny and sums up the project very well if you're interested, and I really recommend it. It's on this page. This just summarizes some of the institutions that supported me for this project. And this is just sort of models the idea that I was trying to communicate, that basically like space and the universe is so big and the economy is so small, and so maybe we could organize ourselves differently. And part of that was by imagining ourselves sending our debt to space. At one point, I met a financier on a plane, and he was somebody that worked at JP Morgan Chase and felt very responsible for the 2008 financial crisis. And I began a really interesting conversation with him. And this book sort of tells a little bit of the story about that relationship, about the difference between classes and our relationship to space. And yeah, I think this is the beginning of also beginning to tell some stories about ways to sort of integrate thinking about space as a way to intervene in some of the processes around financialization. I taught this excellent, very fun workshop at IBM Center for Art and Technology, which is an institution in New York that's very important to me and has a really long, interesting history, and I have a pretty good history with them. At one point, I taught a participatory workshop looking at the way that space science, big tech, and 3D printing excludes women, femmes, and people of color. And so we did a project that was about sort of playing with these things and thinking about what we would want if we were to interact with these things in a different way. And one kind of funny thing is that we produced 3D prints of an asteroid, just as a very kind of like fun tutorial that helped the conversation. Over many years, I have made paintings now of holes made in walls of financial institutions by meteors. I'm interested in the relationship between the insurance industry and space, and the way that we mitigate risk with money, and what is risk. We often think of risk in relationship to money, losing money, but what about other risks that are too big to even imagine, like the risks that are inherent in space and the big unknown? So I've been painting these holes in financial institution walls. And at one point I was doing a show in Chicago, and I met some bankers that were actually profiting off of the bankruptcy or potential bankruptcy of the Chicago public school system. And I made paintings and was able to get them into the offices of the people that were profiting off of the schools. And here's a kind of mock-up I made that I imagined, if there was a representation, a way to sort of keep the awareness alive among bankers in boardrooms about the real risks in the world. Maybe they would work in different ways and maybe not profit off of children and their education or lack thereof. I have a very important relationship with a person who's now passed away named David Graeber, who's a very important author to me and many, many people. He wrote a book called Debt, The First 5,000 Years. And when I first started working on space and debt, he became a kind of comrade or correspondent. And we did a lot of thinking and brainstorming together. Because this is actually a big theme in his book that is very quiet, but cosmic debt is a very big theme in Debt, The First 5,000 Years. And so eventually, after he passed away, I was asked by a pretty great magazine that's online and in print in Europe and in the UK, Arts of the Working Class, if I would make a piece about him to celebrate his work on that book. And so I wrote a little bit about debt and space and health. And the text is called Debt, a Science Fiction story about a small green and blue planet who got itself $281 trillion into debt itself, which is 3 times its economic output. And finally, I worked now on, since 2016 on this project, which is actually trying to kind of reverse some of the harm caused by living in an indebted society. And in a weird way, the hologram has always been about imagining a way to go to space differently, to actually live in a way, even on Earth, outside of some of the rules and mechanics of the economy, and to begin to be able to witness ourselves as living on a planet. It's a viral 4-person health monitoring and diagnostic practice that is now practiced by hundreds of people all over the world, maybe more. I wrote a book about it that came out from Pluto Press in 2020. It's popular in some scenes, and this is what I'm really interested in practicing with you or working through at the residency. I think it is a really interesting practice that we can do as a health practice between each other on the simulation, preparing for the simulation, and after, as a way to think about distributing care between us, but also thinking about social, physical, and mental emotional health as an integrated part of what would change as we get closer to and eventually approach going to space. And I think that the potential here is of finding a way to take this project that I've been working on for years and transform it into something that also produces really interesting ethnographic research about going to space. And I think it is so exciting to me that this could be possible, and I really want to try it with you. So I'm really looking forward to this. I hope that I have the chance to work with you, and if not now, soon. Thanks so much for being here with me. I hope it wasn't too long. Thank you.